How much? How much? I don't dance for free.
We can dance
I
together.
only do presentations. Good morning. Hey, you are awake. Wonderful. Good to see you guys. I know kind of majority of you knows me. Let's see if that's gonna work. No, it's not. There you go. So, still not. No? The clicker doesn't work, guys. What is a presentation without some technical difficulties? The clicker doesn't work. Is it on? A what? The cursor. Where did you see a cursor? Right. You're, there you go. Wait, something is happening, but not from me. Let's see, merci. There you go, guys. Okay, so, sorry, majority of you knows me, not you, I hope you as well. But we don't have time today, so I'm not really gonna go into presenting myself. Read, people, it's online, yeah? But we're jumping straight into the topic, and I'm glad that Jimmy mentioned there are different types of UX strategies. So first I'm gonna clarify when I say UX strategy, what am I talking about? Same thing about therapy. Yeah, because therapy is also a broad term. First, the question, is there anyone here who would feel offended if I say you should go to a therapy? Wonderful. I was going to kick you out otherwise, or talk to you afterwards. I'm kidding. So we're going to clarify what therapy is. And then, guys, we're going to draw the similarities between these two. I know it's a bit of a different point of view than you usually have. Therapy comes from clinical psychology. It's not necessarily clinical problems we're dealing with, though. In UX, you'll see that. And then last but not least, I would like to make this theoretical knowledge more tangible. I've brought you two examples from my work, and the one I'm so proud of, that some of you will know it, I use it quite often. Sounds like a plan? Wonderful. Do you have enough coffee? Sounds like a plan? Good, thank you. Right, as I said, guys, straight into the topic. We don't have time. Let me know if I speak too fast, yeah? I can try to slow down. So, what do I mean when I say UX strategy? You know, guys, our field is so cool that it has thousands of names, yeah? User-centered design, and the design sprint, and the double diamond, yeah? Well, all of that I pretty much call scientific problem solving, and I find these guys to be the best graphic describing our process. You might think I'm kidding, but it is actually. So at the beginning, we have a discovery phase, right? There is huge amounts of information out there in the world, and we are out to gather it. So inevitably, at the beginning, it's chaos. It's mind-blowing. It's a lot, right? At some point, you start making sense of this information. You start untangling it and kind of bringing it together, yeah, painting a full picture from that information. And then we get into solution mode. So design here, not art, not beautiful, that will come here, but design rather as solutions, right? Problem solving, we get into solution mode. We generate a few ideas. We might run a loop or two to kind of optimize the ideas, test them, see what works, what doesn't, go back, optimize, right? Sounds familiar? To then hopefully get onto a smooth delivery, which includes the visual design, the implementation of our ideas, of our concepts. You're on board so far? Sounds familiar, one or the other stage, wonderful. Now, when I say UX strategy, guys, or I actually call a part of it UX psychology, I hope it will get a bit more clear what exactly I call UX psychology later on. But when I say UX strategy, I mean really that first stage of gathering information and creating a fundament of knowledge. I don't mean the finding or implementing solution part. So not even the design, right? The finding solution. The facilitation of solutions, yes. But when I say UX strategy, I kind of mean this part, the discovery and bringing it into a digestible form. Also, guys, when I say UX strategy, I don't mean the strategy for your UX team. Quite a few colleagues call UX strategy the strategy for the UX team. No, this is not what I mean here. It's rather the fundament on which we align and orient the entire business, or should, right? So far, make sense? Cool. Now, it gets a bit more complicated when we get into the other part of the topic, the therapy part, right? For that, guys, we need to take a step back and start with psychology, because it gets quite confusing. People are like, go to a psychiatrist, when they actually mean go to a psychotherapist. And then I love it when my friends are like, Martina, stop psychoanalyzing me. And I'm like, I haven't even started. Like, what do you mean? Yeah? So let me try and shed some light here into all these psycho terms out there. We have the human, yeah? And we have on the one side the psychiatrist, the person who is interested into the physiology, the body, all the bodily processes, the organs, how the body functions, yeah? So a lot of very tangible processes, heartbeat, movements, all of that. You can touch them, you can measure them, you can observe them. On the other side, we've got me, or people like me, the psychologists. We, if at all, are interested only into the brain as a tangible part and how it affects the rest of the body. So you see, guys, inevitably here we have a lot of intangible or implicit processes that we work with, right? You can't just measure the thought of someone, not yet, yeah? So we work with a lot that's not really directly accessible. Now, not a surprise, we study very different things. The psychiatrists, these guys study medicine. They go through evolution of species, biology, the different organs, the different substances, how they affect the organs and the whole processes, right? So again, very tangible processes. The psychologist, on the other hand, is like, I'm not interested in how species evolve, but how you as a personality evolve. How do you evolve as a personality in interaction with others? And as I mentioned, maybe the brain, but not all psychologists understand from brains. The psychiatrist does. And then, guys, it's not a surprise that we treat people very differently, right? The psychiatrist is the doctor. So that person will prescribe you drugs, medicine, not drugs, medicine, yeah? The psychologist, the tradition from the psychologist side is the psychotherapist. Well, this guy will talk to you, will make you fill out surveys, and if they happen, not necessarily put you on a couch, they might just make you feel comfortable. But if they guys start asking you about your childhood, you landed at a psychoanalyst's office, most probably, yeah? Which is a subdiscipline of psychotherapy. So you see, the traditions, even the ways of treating differ very much, yeah? And you maybe also see already that on the psychology side, we kind of have two very distinct parts, yeah? We have the empirical psychology, the one that gathers all the data, all the knowledge about humans, and does all these crazy studies where we kind of find out how we function. But then there is the other part that takes all this knowledge and applies it, guess what? To better humans, to help humans better themselves. Sounds familiar? Guys, same as our process. We go out, we discover the world of our client's problem, and then we use that knowledge to actually look for solutions, right? Same. So, when we go back to the therapy topic, now you guys know what exactly therapy I'm talking about, right? As in what therapy is in psychology, the applied side of the knowledge. But there are many different therapies, because we like to make it complicated, right? So from the empirical psychology, from all the knowledge and how people gather knowledge, there are actually two very distinct directions, if you wish, or they're called schools in psychology. So two ways to perceive people that shape even how we go out and gather information and then how we apply it, of course. What we all agree on pretty much is that the majority of what happens to you is subconscious. We are like this iceberg metaphor, right? Less than 10% we come to realize. So you guys right now don't feel how your hair is growing. You don't feel the clothes on your body anymore, but your brain does, yeah? Therefore, the majority of processes is on the subconscious level. There is a tiny output that we come to realize, talk about, and is actually conscious. Now, the predominant last century, beginning of last century, the predominant direction in psychology was the behaviorist model. Many of you have heard behavioral design, all this behavioral stuff comes from here. These guys were like, there is some stimulus, something happens. If from the outside or from my body, something happens, it triggers a process, then something in here happens, which is a black box. We don't know what happens inside here. And then there is a result, a response from the process. On that conscious side, a person does something very consciously, they say something. Now, these guys were like, they came from psychiatry. Surprise. So they were used on working with the tangible stuff, and they were like, oh, this here, black box, we don't understand it, we don't touch it. Yeah? That was beginning of last century. Mid of last century, something happened called the cognitive revolution. A lot of Oxford, Harvard scientists actually got together and said, wait, just because it's implicit and we can't really touch it, it doesn't mean we can't measure it and we can't assess it. Yeah? So they started including these mental processes, this black box, as part of the behaviors. So the behavior is something very explicit, but what happens in my brain is implicit, but it's also something that's a response to something, to a stimulus, right? So you see much more kind of inclusive approach to, wait, it's not just a black box, not just some miracle here we can't touch. No, we can understand people. Yes, not directly, but we can start understanding them inside. Now, these two directions have formed very different applications, very different therapies. Most famous, behavioral therapy. All of you, I guess, have heard sooner or later, поведенческа терапия. Behavioral therapy is super famous. Now, the other one that's super famous is the one that kind of bridges this gap, right? Comes after the cognitive revolution and is like, guys, cognitive behavioral. Not just the ultimate outputs on the outside, but also what goes inside is interesting. And I told you guys the psychoanalysis really goes deep. So, while the behavioral therapy, their goal is to modify your behavior. You do something, you struggle with it, you don't want to do it anymore. How do we get you to not do it anymore? Or you're afraid of something, but you should do it, traveling with the metro. How do we get you to not be afraid and travel with the metro? That's simple on the surface. These guys here, the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapists, they will look at what are your underlying structures, cognitive and also attitudinal, what are your attitudes to the world, your perception, that makes you do these behaviors. And then guys, as I mentioned, right, the psychoanalysts will be like, wait, there are underlying structures, but they're all in the childhood, acquired early on, while you weren't even conscious yet, yeah? And now in recent years, yay, finally, psychotherapy has arrived at the 21st century to actually look at humans and problems in an ecosystem. So Last century, it was like you have a problem, you need to work on your perception, you need to work on yourself. This century, guys, it's like, wait, you have a problem? Maybe it's your environment, maybe it's your job, maybe it's your boss. You know, so we are getting into the 21st century. It's like, let's look at it holistically. There are many factors that play a role into a problem. Guys, before I lose you, because there are like at least 20 more kinds of therapies, but I wanted you to understand the systemic one, because it really looks at the whole problem as a system, no matter which one direction you go. But the psychoanalysis doesn't follow any process pretty much, but all others follow a process, a certain process. You come as a patient, it's called with the psychiatrist. With psychotherapists, it's called a client. You come as a client and you have a problem. First, my goal as a therapist would be to understand your problem. How often does it appear? In what situations? What's the frequency? What are you going through? What happens in your brain? All of that. How is your environment reacting to you in a problem? Then we analyze, we gather all this data, right? We might talk to families, friends, do self and others' assessment of you and all of that, the questionnaires I mentioned at the beginning. We gather all this information, make you fill out questionnaires and all of that, and then we analyze this data. Put a diagnosis, and that, guys, is actually a code. It's a letter with 3 numbers that you always get, no matter what doctor you go to, you get a letter with 3 numbers. That's your diagnosis. On the diagnostic statistical manual of diseases, don't ask me what it's called. But that helps us to actually work with other experts by just having a letter and 3 numbers. We all know what we are talking about. And now we can work with a team on your problem, dear client. Yeah, super efficient. Once we arrive at a diagnosis, other experts confirm this diagnosis. This is the problem you have, dear client. Now we have the responsibility to go back to the client and educate them. What they have actually, how does it function? What does it mean? For example, when you are depressed, guys, it does form certain patterns of thinking. It's called catastrophic thinking. You get into this dark space cognitively as well. It's normal, yeah? So it's good to know how your problem, how does it work? Then the expert suggests a treatment. But different treatments depend on the individuals, right? So maybe I can imagine going on that high place there and looking out, maybe someone else can't. They will need something else, right, to try and kind of tackle this problem. So you suggest something, the client tries it out. Then, as an expert, your role is to play back. Listen, this is how we started 4 weeks ago. This is how far you are now already. So 4 weeks ago, you couldn't even think of the metro. Now you're already getting down to the station. Next month, we're going to get onto the metro. Yeah, small steps by steps. But the expert is the one who is outside of the problem and can see very objectively the progress, so needs to play it back to the client. And then last but not least, guys, the success for a therapist means the client can utilize all these skills and everything they've learned in the therapy by themselves. They become independent of the tradition. Yeah, this is ultimate success of therapy. Does that sound familiar in some way? Right? The client comes and they say, oh, Martina, we have this thing here and oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, let me talk to your people, to your users, your employees, wherever the problem is, stakeholders, users. Then I can't put all the raw data in front of my clients, right? Never works. You need to somehow consolidate all this knowledge, marketing data, quantitative, qualitative data. You need to somehow bring it together so your colleagues can digest it, right? Understand what you found out there. For that, I usually use an alignment workshop, so I bring the data to life. I storytell the data, what people are going through, so my colleagues cannot kind of run away from feeling what the users go through, yeah? And then we get into solution mode, we pick up the best ideas, we prototype them, we test them, we see what works. Ultimately, we measure our success, right? We see this was the status quo, this is what we did as UXers, this is how we improved the status quo. And then, guys, where we differ quite a lot from therapists, actually, majority of agencies, we try to make our clients dependent on us. Just saying, just a mark here. Now, I promised you to quickly give you an idea what I do as a UX psychologist. I do all of this at the beginning, and when it comes to solution mode, sometimes I don't even understand what my clients are talking about, as in their ideas. I'm like, okay, guys, it could be great. You will know it better than me. I don't need to understand code and stuff to come up with the ground that they come up with great solutions. They're the experts, right? And then the one thing I really differ from majority of our colleagues is my success is also when I see a client a couple of years later do something user-centered. Even if they haven't answered my emails, I'm like, yes, mission done, right? Because we are on a mission. Now, before you fall asleep, let's get into the dough, into the praxis, pretty much. The first example I brought you guys is about a behavioral change. Yeah, so we're kind of on the surface a little bit. And it was end of February 2020. A business owner comes to me from a small startup, 4 people. And he comes to me and he's like, Martina, we have a problem. And I'm like, wonderful, I work with problems, come to mama. And he's like, we have 2 types of users, students and professors. We talk to the students, they give us feedback, we implement what they say, they use it all perfect. The professors, not so much. We ask them, they tell us what to do, we do it, they still wouldn't use us. And I was like, great, get me professors. I need to talk to these guys, I need to understand what's going on in here. So during the first 2 weeks of Corona lockdown worldwide, March 2020, the guy managed to call 5 of his professors, they managed to call 5 other professors, so we ended up having 12 interviews. After the 2 weeks of lockdown, guys, I can't tell you, the best interviews ever. People will push their kids away to talk to me. After 2 weeks, they were so fed up with their families that they were like, no, 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 please ask me more. And I was like, these are the research session users you want to have, right? So I told you, 12 interviews. I actually ended up analyzing 10 out of the 12 interviews, because 2, in the analysis stage, you'll see later probably, I started with 12 post-its for every user, but then in the analysis phase, I realized 2 are complete outlier cases, so not gonna fit our context. And the consolidation, the analysis and consolidation map I choose to go with is called a customer journey. I'm sure most of you are familiar with. If not, guys, highly recommend it. Mapping Experiences by Jim Colback, the Bible for all types of mapping experiences. Now, back to our project, yeah? All these professors, I talked to them for 2 weeks. As I told you, like scheduled an hour, it went to 2 hours. So I started scheduling 1.5 hours and then not having anything afterwards because I didn't want to interrupt them. After 12 interviews, you can't remember who said what, right? They all melt into one. That's completely normal, and that's actually an effect we are looking for. Because I get up the next morning, very important, guys, sleep a night over. After all the data gathering is done, sleep a night over, let your subconscious work a bit on information sorting, and then when you get up the next day, you are better, yeah? So I get up the next day, all these 12 people, or 10 primarily, have melted into one. I write their story. How have they come to become a professor? What are a quote, you know that, it's not quite a persona, it's your user profile, a quote representative for all the 10 people, and then a bit of attitudes. How do they perceive students? How do they perceive their job? How do they go through the world? And then what you see empty here, wait, I actually had it. What you see empty here is their goals. I don't know their concrete goals yet. Yeah, I've heard many different, but not sure what's representative yet. So we start with that very rough, kind of the common story. And then here, guys, you see, I've asked them in the interviews, how is it to teach? What do they go through? That's a certain process here, right? Their teaching journey, if you wish, their experience as a teacher, as a professor. But then I also asked them about similar topics as the one I was researching. So I'll get them through metaphors in a similar mindset to understand what's happening there, guys. Why wouldn't you use that app? But not ask them directly, yeah? So try to pick their brains. Okay, in similar situations, where do you get feedback to your work? What happens when a student gives you feedback? How do you perceive that, right? So I'll try to kind of peel their brains to that topic and see what's going on there. And then, guys, on the horizontal, you should see roughly 4 lanes. Yellow and the images is this on the surface, right? What we can observe, touch, measure, people can talk about, behaviors and touch points, actions, super like objective things. Where it gets interesting, for me personally, is kind of here. The pink I use for pain points. And a pain point can be something super practical, guys, as in I try to order something, now I need to call you to finish my order. Yeah? Super practical, we all can observe it and kind of mark it down, and the person will be aware of it. But it can be also something like a concern. Or I'm afraid of this technology. I don't know how it works yet. Or risks that people perceive. Yeah? So it can be something very implicit. So you see, here is kind of that fluid border between the conscious and subconscious data. And then as green, I always mark the remaining thoughts and feelings. So the remain of the implicit processes that I found out. So far, you're with me. Yellow, actions, touch points, pain points, thoughts and feelings. And you see here 12, actually. Every user has their own color. Because right now, I'm going recording by recording, please work, yes. Recording by recording through all the interviews. And this is around 1,200 post-its, guys. You can never put that in front of your colleagues and be like, there you go, figure it out. Doesn't work, yeah? So again, sleep a night over, very important. The next day, I get up and I start making sense out of all this data. Yeah? What did people say? Where is the truth between all these 10 guys? Yeah, so you see, guys, some of the post-its are more solid color. These are 7 or more people said something. The majority of this n, small n that I had of 10, 12 people. Then you see some of them are really pale. These were like edge cases. Not the 2 edge cases that were completely out of the context, but edge cases in this context. So you have the main case, and then kind of additional cases that happen here. The violet, this awful violet, I always use for ideas that the users already give us or advices, things that we shouldn't lose on the way. And then you see, guys, oh, and by the way, you can hardly see it, but hey, the goals have filled out after all of this. Now I know what are the 4 goals that all of these guys that were up here are trying to achieve as professors, right? And then I told you, small company, 4 people, business founder, front-end developer, front-end, back-end developer, and designer. And I was like, guys, I'm ready. Get together. We'll need 2 appointments, each 4 hours. First appointment, I was like, you need to learn the tool we are going to work in. That's Miro. Most of you will know Miro. I first needed them to feel comfortable in this desk, in this whiteboard. Then I walked them through the whole process. I was like, guys, we didn't just come up with all that here. We actually, for a month, talked to people. I extracted the data. I analyzed the data. Now we've arrived at Paul Fesser, was our professor. Very creative, I know. And then the experience, right? With a bit of a mental models, because remember I asked them about similar topics, their perceptions, their mental models. And then guys, I let the 4 guys, the business, decide where is the biggest pain point or the biggest impact that you can make. So out of all these stages that you see here, they actually chose 2. And we formulated 2 challenges, as in how might we, you know that, design sprints, how might we help the professors? We took the first challenge, and I couldn't let them sleep a night over. We didn't have that much time, but I gave them a bit of a longer break, lunch break. So they can kind of distract themselves and then come back to, this was the challenge we were trying to solve. But guys, we had a second challenge that we parked on the side, backlog, yeah? We started solving this challenge by them returning from lunch, me warming up their brains with a fun activity so they kind of break from their boxes. And then we started looking for solutions. Everything you see here was actually here, generated by them. And then we started discussing the ideas, clustering them. You know probably this process. I don't need to go in detail. They, again, voted on the ones with the biggest potential for them as a business. And before the first session was over, we roughly started discussing and prioritizing them on an effort, impact. So how much it's going to cost the business to do it, how much impact it's going to have. And session was over. The second session, guys, same. We started in the morning. I reminded them of everything again. Who is the user? What do they go through? How did they even become a professor? And then I remind them what they chose as the moments of truth, where they'll have the biggest impact as a business, yeah? And then we got back to that winning cluster that we started prioritizing the ideas, yeah? We did, I think, was an hour and a half discussing these winning ideas. And you see on the backlog, we parked all the other ideas. They're not lost. They're still there. We just picked the best ones, as in the ones we saw the most potential. And then they voted again. 5 were the winners out of the, say, 20 category with 20. 1 was an immediate to do. 1 was something they could do straight away. We didn't need to think about it. Such a low-hanging fruit, yeah? And then we were with remaining 4. And I was like, guys, now I want you to develop these ideas, to tell me, how does it work for the user? How does it work for you as a business? What are the hypotheses on which all of this concept builds? What do we need to test? These were these concept posters that you see. And I said, guys, right, the one guy was a front-end developer. So he was like, wait, is this dashboard what we are talking about? And I was like, oh my gosh, our prototype is ready. Absolutely what we were talking about. Yes, it's very good to have a front-end developer in the team. Yeah? So while we were discussing the ideas, we already had something built. And then guess what, guys? I let them present the ideas, we discussed them, and then we started actually as a last step, because they've done already usability testing before, they've done user interviews, they were good at that so far. So I didn't want to take it away from them. What we did as a final step was actually to plan the scenario for the prototype test that they already had. They had 3 more developer ideas to test, and then don't forget, many more ideas to develop and to test, and another challenge to solve the same way. They didn't need me anymore, right? And before I jump into the second one, because I told you, it's super emotional, I'm so proud of that. Do I even have time? You're not going to kick me out anyway. You're not falling asleep, I see, so that's a good sign. This one, guys, like, I hope I'm not going to cry at the end, because it's so dear to my heart. It's a smart home client, around 10 people, a bigger startup. From Berlin, Levy, they're called. Actually, Hum Systems, but their product is called Levy. They're powered by the biggest electricity supplier in Berlin. If some of you has lived in Berlin, you know these guys. You can't run away from them. And these guys offer, so I think it was 3 years ago, the entire EU needed to build smoke detectors in every home. We need to have, I don't know how it's in Bulgaria, but in Germany, every home needed to be fitted with a smoke detector. And what these guys did is build this smart ring that goes around the smoke detector, and it has all types of sensors like air quality and like movement and all different gadgets in it. Now, mind you guys, this project was 2018. In 2018, when you said to people or to Germans, when you said to Germans on the street, what do you think about smart home? You know what the reactions were? Alexa, it's recording me. This was the time back then, yeah? And we've done a bit of a previous effort with this client. They knew me already. We kind of tried to delve into the psyche of their investors. And obviously we were successful because this investor, this powered by the biggest electricity supplier, did become an investor, a partner actually. And they came and said, our door-to-door salespeople see an opportunity there. Oh, I love when I hear that, tell me about it, yeah? The sales people see an opportunity. Well, our device doesn't sell because elderly people are afraid of smartphones, and the whole device works with a smartphone. So we need to create some sort of a remote for elderly people. We get $250,000 straight away investment to create a remote for elderly people. Then we'll break the market, we'll sell. And this is a brief. And I'm like, oh, wonderful that my client knows me already. They were like, Martina, come. And I'm like, yes, we need to talk to elderly people. Let's see what they think about this great opportunity, yeah? And guess what? I got one of the founders, marketing executive. I was like, Amir, we have work to do. We went out, so kickoff was 10 o'clock in the morning. 11, we were on the street, and I was like, elderly people. I was like, no, you're too young, guys. And then we found a lady. We invited her to a coffee shop nearby, to coffee. We paid the coffee for her, and we were like, we need to chat, to just understand how you guys function. Yeah, we are doing something for you, but first we need to know how you function. And guess what, guys? Elderly people love to talk. So wonderful. This lady gave us really a great base as in, okay, how should we go forward? What exactly are we trying to find out? How do they function? So that was before lunch. We had lunch. And then Amir says, the marketing executive, oh, Martina, in my district, there is a mall. It's kind of a small mall. The second floor is a coffee shop. All the elderly people from the district gathered there. And I was like, oh my gosh, gold mine. Yeah? We walk in there. There were literally like 20 tables with all different groups of elderly people. And I was like, where do we even start? Yeah? So for just one day, guys, we were done at 6 o'clock around, 6 p.m. For just one day, we managed to talk to 6 people, which gave us different perspectives. And then next day, you know that already, right? So we had the kickoff and all of that. And then we get back to actually debrief what we found out. You know what I use pink and red for already? Pain points. And then, guys, the violet was risks and concerns. And the dark blue was pain points from business point of view. Ow! It was all like, oh, this is not gonna work well. Well, guess what? We found out that elderly people don't like devices who are for elderly people. Surprise. They make them feel old. No, come back. No, come back. They make them feel old. Yeah? Or devices that give them the feeling they can't make it anymore on their own. They treasure their autonomy. They live alone. They're still old, but they make it. And now we're coming, trying to take their autonomy away with some device that goes I don't know, emergency or something. They were like, you know what? We had these bracelets. When I fall, that I call emergency, I smashed it on the floor. I was like, and they tell you with pleasure, with pride, how they crush these devices. So this was our finding. Crushing, right? The 250,000 flying away. But we were like, wait. These guys actually had more devices than I do. They had a Fitbit, they had a tablet, they had a smartphone. And I was like, these elderly guys. And I was like, guys, where do you get these devices from? And they were like, oh, my son, or the husband of my daughter. And I was like, okay, yeah, tell me more, tell me more. You know what? Well, these guys, so we are the channel for our parents to these new technology guys. And some of these guys, like us, the grown-up kids, were already our customers. And we recruited 3, you see a bit of a differentiate. We recruited 3 potential customers and 5 existing customers who had an elderly relative living alone. Yeah, so that same context. So we repivoted the research. While we were scheduling all these 8 sessions, interview sessions that you see the raw data there, you know it already, I did some desk research, found some market research, the German guys. So 2017, 18, yeah? 70% know that smart home is the future. 30% consider acquiring some smart home device. So Germans are like, we'll watch everybody else use it and then we'll think about it. Yeah, it's the future, but we'll think about it. And I was like, great. Still, got back to my sessions, right? This time we didn't do recordings. With some we did audio recordings, which was great, but we took a lot of notes. We went through all the raw data, you know that process already. And then, guys, because we had a fire alarm. I didn't want to put people in fire emergency situation, right, just to see how they react. Not so cool, especially elderly people. Not so ethical. But guess what? There is tons of academic research. So 50 years ago, it wasn't that unethical to do it. A lot of professors have done it. You can learn from what they found out. Yeah? All this information now, guys, it wasn't so much a journey this time. It wasn't about the process we were looking at, but rather mindsets that people are in, right? Me, as a grown-up child of a lone living parent, what's happening there? What is through my mind? What are my concerns? So this time, instead of a journey, I decided to consolidate the data into a mental model diagram. If you want to know everything about it, Indy Young is the guru for mental models and active listening and great interviews. Highly recommend her. And then, guys, what you see here, these are called buckets or columns. The items in the buckets and the columns are actually jobs to be done. For the ones of you who are familiar with the concept, another book from Jim that I would highly recommend, the Jobs to be Done playbook. Now, back to our map. And that's just of a snippet of the entire map, guys. So we started looking at what happens for these people to acquire this device, start using it, and then even roll it out to their relatives. Yeah? I was done with this data. You see me presenting data. It became very alive for these 10 people that I called together. And I was like, guys, I'm ready. Let me show you what people are going through. I walked them through, and then I asked them all together to start mapping their touch points. The gray ones that you see are this business partner. We didn't have much impact here. The light blue, we had some touch point with the client who wanted to expand, kind of strengthen this one. The blue ones were the ones where my client had a direct touch point with the customers, with the users. And then the pale gray that you don't see here, guys, were the ones they wanted to create going forward. They didn't even have that. Yeah? And then, you know that already. I facilitated the ideation. This was exactly a case where they started saying, yeah, we will integrate this API. And I was like, what are these guys talking? Guys, did I write it correctly? Okay, I'll put it down here. Let's go to the next idea. I didn't even understand what they're coming up with. I didn't need to. They had already good enough base to come up with their ideas. When I left, they started pulling one by one these orange post-its that were the ideas, descoping some of them, because they discussed them further and decided, no, no, we've got a better thing. And that, guys, the black bubbles, are actually the screens from their app. They didn't end up develop any device, but expanded the usage of their app. And I told you this was just a small snippet. Well, this was the main user, and this was their relative living alone. And here also came police and fire department. So they actually even made a business partnership to be able to deliver all these services. Not a single device built. Dear salespeople from the company I don't want to mention. And then in 2001, guys, I sort, after that other project I told you about, I sort my murals and I'm like, wait, this was the map. What is this thing here? Remember I told you who I got with me on the street to do the research? Well, guys, this was their marketing strategy. They've copied the mindsets that we had, and based on that, they've built their entire marketing strategy. Remember, I was with the marketing executive. Surprise! Data works. Research works. And because that wasn't enough, guys, a year later, German media explodes. A son living in London saved his mom from a fire who lives close by Munich, thanks to our device. Thanks not to developing a remote, but really understanding how people tick. Yeah? Now imagine, guys, we would have skipped that, gotten the 250,000 and developed a remote. What would have happened? Yeah? Just to find out that people don't like it and they want to crash it. Is she crashing it? No. Was she crashing it? Come on, lady. You can do it. No, it's not play. Well, she's crashing the laptop. You can. One GIF and it doesn't work, guys. Well, I hope you still enjoyed it and thank you very much.